Hi, it's Katrina. What if the deadliest weapon on the battlefield wasn't a tank or a drone, but a living creature? From ancient siege tactics to modern top-secret programs, the animal kingdom has been an untapped arsenal for the military. Today we are exploring the most bizarre and terrifying ways that animals have been weaponized by armies across the globe. Get ready to discover the chilling history of animals used in wartime. Rhinos in armor. Would you believe that people once thought the rhinoceros could be used as a weapon of mass destruction? Back in the day, the rhino could have been a viable military asset. Imagine a mountain of muscle and horn charging across the battlefield. That would surely send enemies scattering, but did it really ever happen? The idea of using rhinos in warfare is a fascinating tale filled with bizarre myths, some serious misunderstandings, and maybe a little bit of wishful thinking. So let's take a closer look and try to figure out if these beasts really were the original battle tanks. First, let's tackle the Hollywood version of events. In the movie 300, there's a scene where the Persians unleash a massive, rampaging war rhino at the Battle of Thermopylae. It's a cool visual, there's no denying that, but historians are pretty sure that never happened. But what if the idea wasn't entirely made up? On the other side of Europe, there's evidence that ancient armies might have toyed around with this concept. But how would it work? I mean, have you ever seen a rhino? They're not exactly taking orders and following commands like a German shepherd. Rewind the clock to 1515. A German artist, Albrecht Dürer, one of my dad's favorites, created a famous woodcut of a rhinoceros covered in what looks like medieval armor. It's got plates, rivets, and a face shield. This thing looks absolutely ready for battle. According to the text on the back of the woodcut, the rhino was supposedly used by Portuguese soldiers to combat war elephants. But wait, did rhinos and elephants really go head-to-head? According to an engraving on the back of the woodcut, rhinos were described as the ultimate anti-elephant weapon: fast, impetuous, and cunning. They were said to charge with their heads down, ripping open elephant bellies with their horns. But here's the catch. Dürer had never actually seen a rhino. His artwork was based on a written description from Valentin Fernandez, a Moravian printer. Fernandez had witnessed a rhino and an elephant sparring in a spectacle hosted by King Manuel of Portugal, not on the battlefield. So while Dürer's rhino looked like it was ready to stomp into battle, that wasn't really the case. Believe it or not, there's a story from northeast India that is somehow even stranger. An ethnic group known as the Alms reportedly used rhinos in a, shall we say, more creative way. The legend goes that they would get the rhinos drunk. Yes, you heard me right, drunk. And after the animals were sufficiently liquored up, they would supposedly give them an electric shock, sending them on a confused, angry, and chaotic charge toward enemy lines. You can think of it as a very early form of psychological warfare. I mean, imagine being on the battlefield and seeing a stampede of drunken, electrified rhinos coming at you. What do you even do at that point? The chaos alone would probably be enough to make you turn and run. While the thought of rhinos in combat makes for a fantastic story, history suggests it was more myth than military might. They're just too unpredictable and too difficult to control to be effective soldiers. And one more thing. If a rhino and an elephant actually went head-to-head, which one do you think would win? Let me know your verdict in the comments. Rome's four-legged legionaries. There was a lot going on in Roman warfare. They had the strongest, most powerful, and organized army in the world. They also recognized the value of animals, including our four-legged best friends. And I don't mean horses, although they were critical too. Some of the most effective warriors in the Roman army were dogs. This isn't just about Roman soldiers having pets. This is how the world's most disciplined military used an animal as a crucial part of its war machine. Dogs were crucial assets for security and scouting. They used a large, powerful Mastiff-type breed known as the Canis pugnax, or the fighting dog, and the Mossian dogs. I'm sad to tell you they are no longer around today, but the Canis pugnax lineage is considered an ancestor to the Neapolitan Mastiff and the Cane Corso. These dogs were excellent watchdogs and were used to guard military camps, depots, and supply trains. Their sheer size and presence were a huge deterrent to thieves or enemy spies. The Roman writer Vegetius, in his military treatise De Re Militari, describes the use of guard dogs trained to bark at the stealthy approach of an enemy. Their incredible hearing and sense of smell made them an early warning system for ambushes or attacks on military camps. There were also times when they were used on the battlefield as intimidation or psychological warfare. The Romans were known to have trained some dogs to be shock troops, wearing spiked collars and sometimes even crude armor. These dogs were meant to be released at the beginning of a battle to break up enemy formations, cause panic, and disrupt an enemy cavalry charge. The Column of Marcus Aurelius in Rome, a large monument from the late 2nd century AD, depicts large dogs wearing spiked collars and chainmail. They were also used in gladiatorial combat. The Greek historian Polybius is said to have recorded a particularly brutal use of dogs by a rival army, where they were used to attack enemy formations and create chaos. While he doesn't specifically say that the Romans did this, the Romans were known for copying effective tactics from their enemies. One particularly grim account suggests that some dogs were used as fire bearers. The Romans reportedly attached pots of Greek fire to the backs of dogs and sent them charging into the enemy, causing chaos and terror. Although historians debate whether or not this actually happened. The Romans were already highly organized, and sending a pack of unpredictable animals into a tight formation would have been difficult to control. To be fair, it was probably not a common practice, but it does show just how far the Romans were willing to go to gain an advantage in battle. It probably depended on who the enemy was. Excavations at Roman forts and permanent military bases, such as those along Hadrian's Wall in Britain, have uncovered the skeletons of large dogs. This archaeological evidence supports the idea that dogs were a standard part of a garrison's security. In fact, you may have seen the famous mosaic from Pompeii that says Cave Canem, or beware of dog. This shows more examples of Romans using dogs as guardians. These fighting dogs also protected homes and farms and were a huge part of everyday life. Roman legions often operated in unfamiliar, rugged terrain, and the ability to track an enemy or avoid an ambush was crucial. Dogs, with their superior senses, were perfect for this. They could detect people and animals at a distance that a human sentry couldn't. Roman patrols and scouts would use dogs to track down fugitives or locate hidden enemy forces. While usually the Romans did not use dogs on the front lines, their role in the Roman army was essential. And who wouldn't be scared by an enormous barking mastiff? Weaponized bugs. What's more terrifying than a catapult being launched at you? A catapult loaded with angry bees or scorpions, that's what. Throughout history, humans have weaponized insects to wage war, cause chaos, and deliver pure misery. From ancient scorpion bombs to modern bioterrorism, it seems our six-legged frenemies have been unwitting recruits in some of humanity's darkest schemes. Let's start in ancient Rome, where Emperor Septimius Severus learned the hard way that scorpions are no joke. Around the 2nd century, he tried to conquer the desert city of Hatra, only to be greeted by the world's first scorpion shower. The defenders packed clay pots with scorpions, which were plentiful in the region, and hurled them at the Roman soldiers. I'm sure the last thing they expected was to have venomous arachnids rain down on their heads. Hot oil? Maybe, but scorpions? That's a surprise. Severus's soldiers endured 20 days of stinging chaos before they finally retreated, defeated not by swords, but by scorpion stings. And it wasn't just scorpions. Medieval Europeans turned to bees when under siege, launching hives at enemies using catapults. Picture this. You're on a ship, ready to attack an enemy vessel, and suddenly a hive of furious bees lands on deck. I mean, what do? Probably dive into the water. By the 14th century, inventors even created a windmill-like contraption to fling hives more effectively. Medieval ingenuity at its finest. Fast forward to the 19th century, and things got even scarier. Let me introduce you to Nasrullah Bahadur Khan, a ruler with a flair for the sadistic. In what is now Uzbekistan, he created the infamous bug pit, a dungeon filled with assassin bugs and sheep ticks. These insects didn't just bite, they injected digestive enzymes that caused excruciating sores and eventually death. British prisoners thrown into this nightmare were slowly consumed alive until Nasrullah mercifully ended their suffering with a beheading. Even in modern times, insects remain a weapon of choice. During World War II, the Japanese military unleashed plague-infected fleas and cholera-coated flies on Chinese cities, leading to the deaths of hundreds of thousands. They even considered dropping plague-carrying fleas on San Diego, but thankfully that plan was scrapped. The Vietnam War saw the Viet Cong weaponize nature yet again. They lobbed wasps' nests and hornet hives into U.S. positions, booby-trapped tunnels with scorpions, and even turned Asian giant honeybees into flying weapons of terror. On the flip side, the U.S. military attempted to turn bees into allies by spraying Vietnamese soldiers with pheromones to provoke attacks. However, this bee brigade idea never really took off. Why have insects been such effective weapons? Well, they're cheap, abundant, and let's face it, terrifying. Nobody wants a swarm of bees or a pit of assassin bugs thrown at them. Today's wars are fought with drones and missiles, but history reminds us that sometimes the most fearsome warriors have 6 legs and a stinger. And now for dolphins in the Navy. But really quick, I want to give a shout out to Donald Gino and Danny DeVillen for supporting this channel. Thanks so much, guys. Be sure to hit the notification bell and check out our memberships to join the Origins Explained family. The Marine Mammal Program. Dolphin soldiers. It sounds like a movie plot, but it's real, and it's weirder than you can imagine. This is a true story about the U.S. Navy Marine Mammal Program, a secret military experiment that began during the Cold War. It's the story of how our government looked out at the ocean and decided that the perfect warrior wasn't a man in a submarine, but a dolphin. And this is where it gets really weird. Why would the Navy choose a dolphin for top secret missions? For a few reasons, actually. First off, dolphins have an incredible superpower, echolocation. Imagine having sonar built right into your brain. Dolphins can detect objects like underwater mines or enemy divers with pinpoint accuracy, even in murky waters. Their natural abilities outperformed even the best man-made technology at the time. The U.S. Navy realized this in the 1950s when they studied dolphins to improve torpedo designs. By the 1960s, the focus shifted from engineering inspiration to training dolphins themselves for real-life missions. Dolphins are also smart. I mean, really smart. We've all seen them at aquariums, jumping through hoops, tossing the trainer in the air, coordinated flips. You know, that's just the tip of the iceberg. These animals are incredibly trainable, fast, agile, making them the perfect candidate for covert operations. I mean, think about it. If you were a Navy SEAL on an underwater mission, wouldn't you want a super intelligent dolphin as your personal bodyguard? We are now living in a world where dolphins, sea lions, and even beluga whales are trained to assist in naval operations. These animals are part of the Marine Mammal Program, and you won't believe what they are capable of. The dolphins of the Marine Mammal Program were trained for some seriously wild tasks. They were primarily used for mine detection and port security. They would use their echolocation to locate underwater mines, saving human divers from incredibly dangerous missions. During the Iraq War in 2003, these dolphins were deployed to the Persian Gulf to clear mines. They even wore cameras to help them locate suspicious objects. During the Vietnam War, dolphins guarded U.S. ships in Cam Ranh Bay, detecting potential saboteurs and divers. Rumors even claim that they attacked enemy frogmen. These animals fetched lost equipment, delivered tools, and even brought soda cans to researchers underwater. Some reports also suggest that dolphins were trained to attach explosives to enemy ships or poke enemy divers with needles full of carbon dioxide. The Navy has repeatedly denied these claims, but it's hard not to wonder. It's not as if the military has never lied to us before. Who knows what could really be happening? For all we know, they've learned how to communicate with dolphins and are teaching them English. Or maybe Russian? I mean, we are just one AI program away from communicating directly with animals. Of course, back in the day, the Soviet Union also got into the marine mammal game. They reportedly trained dolphins to guard naval bases and detect enemy submarines. There is even a claim that Soviet dolphins were sold to Iran in the 2000s. The program ended many years ago, but started back up again when Russia invaded Crimea in 2014. Today, Russia actively uses dolphins, beluga whales, and seals for military purposes. Satellite imagery showed the presence of floating pens for dolphins at the entrance to the Sevastopol harbor, likely intended to protect Russian warships from Ukrainian special forces divers. Beluga whales and seals have been found with cameras strapped to their heads, probably doing surveillance missions in the Arctic. Today, the marine mammal program still operates. Despite advancements in technology, no robot has matched the efficiency and accuracy of these marine animals. Dolphins continue to guard naval bases, detect mines, and even help scientists study underwater ecosystems. So, are dolphins secret agents of the sea? Maybe not quite like in the movies, but their contributions to military history are nothing short of remarkable. Homing pigeons. All right, let's talk about birds. Many of you might not be pigeon fans, but this bird is a true battle-hardened war hero. I'm talking about a feathered warrior with a superpower that no military engineer could ever replicate: an innate GPS. These little winged wonders have a unique superpower. They can find their way home across vast distances. No GPS? No problem. They've been used for thousands of years to deliver messages, especially when things got chaotic during wars. So how did pigeons end up as wartime MVPs? The story of the military pigeon starts way, way back. We're talking ancient times. Around 1350 BC in Egypt, they were using pigeons to carry news about the flooding of the Nile, critical information for farming. But these birds weren't just limited to Egypt. Ancient Mesopotamia, Persia, Greece, and Rome also put pigeons to work. In fact, Greek pigeons carried news of Olympic victories, since there was no social media back then, and Roman armies relied on them for battlefield communication. Who needs instant messaging when you've got a pigeon with a solid work ethic? During the Roman siege of Mutina in 43 BC, a general named Decimus Brutus was trapped inside the city by Mark Antony's forces. With no way for a human messenger to get through the enemy lines, Decimus used homing pigeons to send crucial messages to his allies. These brave birds flew over the battlefield, successfully delivering information that ultimately helped break the siege and defeat Antony's army. The use of pigeons at the siege of Mutina was so famous that it was recorded by Roman historians. The author Pliny the Elder even wrote about it, describing how the pigeons were a crucial part of the battle. Fast forward to more modern times, and pigeons were still delivering the goods. In the 1800s, newspapers in New York used pigeons to send news from arriving ships in Nova Scotia. By the 20th century, pigeons were indispensable during wartime. When radios failed, wires were cut, or soldiers couldn't reach safety, pigeons saved the day. Pigeons were the only way to send messages through enemy territory. One pigeon in particular became a legend. His name was Cher Ami, French for dear friend. According to the story, it was World War I during the Meuse-Argonne offensive. He was tasked with carrying a message from the Lost Battalion, roughly 550 men who had been separated from the rest and were surrounded by fire on all sides. Cher Ami took off and almost immediately was shot in the chest and lost a leg, but this brave bird kept flying. He delivered the message, saving the lives of over 200 soldiers. He even received a medal for his bravery. In World War II, pigeons were equally heroic, carrying messages when radios had to stay silent, like during the D-Day landings. Some pigeons were so important that they were also awarded for their bravery. In total, 32 pigeons received Britain's Dickin Medal, the animal equivalent of the Medal of Honor. So next time you see a pigeon on the street, give it a little nod. You might just be looking at the descendant of a true hero. But how do they do it? How do pigeons know where to go? Scientists are still trying to figure that one out, but theories include using the sun as a compass, sensing Earth's magnetic field, or even navigating by smell. Some researchers believe they also recognize landmarks, kind of like feathered tourists with excellent memory. Pigeons didn't just work in wars, they also played a role in medicine. In 1903, a German pharmacist used pigeons to deliver medications. Even in the 1980s, French hospitals relied on pigeons to carry lab specimens. And they've also dabbled in smuggling. From sneaking cell phones into prisons to carrying drugs across borders, Pigeons have a bit of a rebellious streak. Explosive rats. When you hear the words spy gadget, your mind probably goes straight to something from a James Bond movie. Maybe a watch that shoots lasers, or a pen that fires poison darts. But what if I told you the real history of secret weapons is even weirder? During World War II, British secret agents took things to a whole new level by designing weapons like combustible Chianti bottles, coal bombs, and even rats stuffed with explosives. But why rats, you ask? Well, let's dive into this bizarre tale of covert sabotage and find out. The British Special Operations Executive, or SOE, was tasked with helping resistance movements fight back against the Nazis. Their motto? Set Europe ablaze. And boy, did they deliver. The SOE's genius lab, Aston House, churned out weapons and tools that were as sneaky as they were deadly. They disguised bombs as coal chunks, sugar beets, and even Balinese wood carvings. And if they needed to pass a secret message, they would hide codes in toothpaste tubes, collar studs, and matchboxes. But their most bizarre idea, the one that stands out in the dark history of spycraft, was the exploding rat. The SOE's bright idea was to gut real rats, stuff their bodies with plastic explosives, and sew them back up. The idea was to hide these rat bombs in piles of coal that were being used to power German factories. A German worker, seeing a dead rat in the coal pile, would naturally pick it up and toss it into the furnace. And boom! The heat would detonate the explosives, hopefully causing enough chaos to disrupt the factory's operations. But the thing is, the rats never actually got to fulfill their explosive destiny. A shipment of them was intercepted by the Germans before they could be deployed. The Nazis, completely bewildered by the discovery, immediately assumed this was just the tip of the iceberg. They believed the British had an entire army of these explosive rodents and they had been smuggled all over Europe. So they launched an intense search for non-existent rat bombs. The psychological havoc caused by these phantom explosives ended up being more effective than the actual explosions might have been. So things didn't go exactly as planned, but hey, it worked out in the end. The SOE's creativity didn't stop with rats. They also developed exploding bicycle pumps, wine bottles that doubled as bombs, and even a special kind of itching powder to cause extreme discomfort to German soldiers. They even made sandals that left footprints resembling those of local farmers to throw off trackers. They really did cover all their bases. While many of these gadgets sound like they belong in a spy comedy, the SOE's efforts were a very serious part of the war. They trained over 13,000 men and women, and their bizarre tools of sabotage helped weaken enemy forces across Europe. While the exploding rats never fulfilled their mission, their legacy is a perfect example of how sometimes the most effective weapon is simply the one that makes your enemy think they're going insane. Project X-Ray. World War II's most bizarre secret weapon might have been flaming bats. Seriously, this is the story of Project X-Ray, and it's wild. Before the atomic bomb made history in 1945, another, stranger secret weapon was tested in the New Mexico desert: bat bombs. Think about it, tiny, furry kamikazes. Okay, maybe not quite kamikazes exactly, but still. Thousands of bats carrying tiny incendiary devices ready to ignite chaos in enemy cities. Codename Project X-Ray. It all started with Dr. Lytle S. Adams, a dentist with a flair for wild ideas. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Adams proposed an unusual plan to President Franklin D. Roosevelt: strap tiny incendiary bombs to bats, release them over Japanese cities, and let the flames do the rest. Why bats? Well, they were abundant, could carry twice their weight, and loved sneaking into the nooks and crannies of buildings. This made them perfect for starting fires in Japan's wooden cities. The military thought this idea over and eventually gave the green light. Adams found his winged recruits in Carlsbad Caverns, home to millions of Mexican free-tail bats. These little guys were cooled into hibernation using ice cube trays. Yes, really. So they'd stay docile during transport. And once they were released from parachuted canisters, the bats would warm up, fly off, and, according to the plan, drop their fiery packages. What could possibly go wrong? Just about everything. First, artificial cooling was tricky, and many of the bats didn't wake up in time. Others woke up too soon, causing chaos during test runs. One particularly disastrous test ended with bats setting fire to a hangar and the staff car of a general who had come to observe things. Oops. Let's just say he was not impressed. Even the bats themselves had personal drama. During mating season, male bats became so distraught over pregnant females they refused to eat. Even bats have relationship issues. Despite these hiccups, the project pressed on. The bombs, weighing about 1 ounce, could produce flames nearly 2 feet long for 8 minutes. Full-scale tests were planned for August 1944, but the project was abruptly canceled. Why? Well, by then, the atomic bomb was ready, and let's face it, bat bombs just couldn't compete with that level of destruction. Plus, the military brass probably didn't love the idea of fiery bats flying around willy-nilly. I'm sure PETA wasn't too happy about it either. Project X-Ray was officially terminated in October of 1944. War elephants. What would you be more scared to face in battle, a rhino or an elephant? Trick question, they're both terrifying. The first recorded use of elephants in battle happened in 330 BC at the Battle of Gaugamela. Persian King Darius III brought a handful of elephants to face Alexander the Great. But spoiler alert, it didn't work. Alexander won, proving that strategy often beats size. Things got intense, however, when Alexander marched into India and faced King Porus, who brought 200 elephants. But these beasts, despite their intimidating presence, still failed to outmaneuver Alexander's brilliant tactics. In the Western Mediterranean, King Pyrrhus of Epirus brought elephants to Sicily around 280 BC to fight against the Romans. Seeing these massive animals for the first time, the Roman troops were understandably terrified. I mean, imagine the noise, the sheer size, and the destruction these creatures caused. Pyrrhus won some battles, but winning like Pyrrhus came at such high costs that it gave us the term Pyrrhic victory. The most famous story of war elephants comes from Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who decided to take 37 elephants over the Alps to attack Rome during the Second Punic War. The entire snowy Alps. You might be asking, how did he do it? Well, ancient sources offer 2 explanations. He either built massive rafts to ferry them across rivers or forced them to swim, which they can swim pretty well, but elephants are not made for snowy mountain passes. The Alps were not kind to these animals. By the time Hannibal reached Italy, most of his elephants had succumbed to starvation, exhaustion, or the harsh conditions. Historians believe only about a dozen of them survived to participate in the Battle of Trebia. Elephants weren't always reliable on the battlefield. One infamous example came during the Roman siege of Numantia in 153 BC. A Roman elephant got hit in the head with a stone, freaked out, and started trampling everyone, enemy and ally alike. Seeing this, the other elephants followed suit, creating absolute chaos. At the decisive Battle of Zama in 202 BC, Hannibal had 80 elephants ready to charge. Unfortunately, though, these animals were inexperienced and panicked mid-battle, causing more harm to the Carthaginians than the Romans. Hannibal's last gamble with elephants failed, and Carthage's war elephant era came to a dramatic end. So were elephants the ultimate ancient weapon? Kind of. They were terrifying, massive, and hard to stop, unless they decided to stomp their own side, that is. That would just be a horrible way to go, I think. Sounds like an episode of 1,000 Ways to Die. Anti-tank dogs. Dogs are our best friends no matter whose side they're on, and they have fought alongside us in many wars. During World War II, the Soviets, in a moment of, let's say, desperate creativity, decided to turn man's best friend into a weapon of war. Their target? Enemy tanks. And their solution? The anti-tank dog. Spoiler alert, it didn't go too well. But let's back up. Why would anyone think that a dog could take down a tank? Tanks were the terror of the battlefield. They were big, heavily armored, and nearly unstoppable. Landmines were an option, but they were tricky to place, Easy to miss and wasteful if you needed to stop an entire fleet of tanks. And that's where dogs came in. They were fast, loyal, and most importantly, they were able to carry things. It seemed like a genius plan, right? Right? The Soviets started experimenting with anti-tank dogs in the 1920s and 30s, but these weren't just any dogs. They were primarily German shepherds, known for their intelligence and trainability. The original idea was relatively humane. Strap a bomb to the dog, train it to run under a tank, and then pull a cord to release the explosive before dashing back to safety. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, unfortunately, it turned out that dogs aren't great at operating machinery. Who knew? So the plan was reworked. If the dogs couldn't drop the bomb, they would be the bombs. Now that's just cruel. Trainers strapped 20 to 25 pounds of explosives onto the dogs with a wooden lever sticking out. The idea was that the dog would dive under a tank, triggering the lever, and then boom, no more tank and no more dog. The dog would end up paying the ultimate price. Now, you can't just send a dog into battle with a bomb strapped to its back. You have to train it. And this training was something else. This was quite cruel, but during times of war, cruelty is everywhere. Trainers would starve the dogs and then place food under the tanks to teach the dogs to crawl underneath them. Once the dogs mastered this, the tanks were turned on to get the dogs used to the noise. Add in simulated battlefield mayhem, gunfire, explosions, shouting, and voila! You've got a trained anti-tank dog, or so they thought. In 1941, the first batch of anti-tank dogs was sent to the front lines. And guess what? Chaos ensued. Turns out, dogs don't handle war very well. Many of them were terrified by the noise and gunfire, refusing to go anywhere near the tanks. Others got confused and ran back to their handlers, with live bombs still strapped to their backs. It did not end well. But it gets worse. The dogs that actually did charge the tanks had a major flaw in their training. They were taught using Soviet tanks, which ran on diesel. The German tanks, however, ran on gasoline, which smelled completely different. As a result, the dogs often ignored the enemy tanks and charged their own side. Of the 30 dogs sent out in one notable mission, only 4 managed to detonate near enemy tanks. The rest either ran away, were taken out, or exploded in the wrong places, like back in the Soviet trenches. Predictably, the program was scaled back after about a year, though the Soviets estimated that the dogs did destroy over 300 tanks during the war. While the Soviets were the most famous for this bizarre experiment, they weren't the only ones. The Japanese, the Vietnamese, and even the United States dabbled in anti-tank dog programs. They all faced the same problem. Dogs are just too unpredictable, too loyal, and frankly, too smart to be reliable walking bombs. Modern insurgents in Iraq even tried using dogs for similar purposes. However, like their predecessors, they eventually gave up and switched to using donkeys instead, which doesn't really make me feel any better. So what's the moral of this dark, strange, and bizarre chapter in history? Maybe it's that dogs are better suited for companionship than combat, and that we shouldn't be sacrificing our best friend. Maybe it's a reminder that not all ideas, no matter how desperate, are good ones. Either way, the anti-tank dog remains one of the strangest footnotes in the history of warfare. Which animal would you want alongside you if you were fighting a war? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!